Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. Welcome to our AVID Online live session. For those who are joining us for the first time, a special welcome. Please refer to the chat box for more information on AVID Learning and our partners for this discussion. AVID Online was launched on the 1st of April 2020 in a direct response to the pandemic. So now we're 18 months young and over 275 programs later, we can say that although 2020 and most of 2021 has challenged us in unprecedented ways, we continue to champion and bring to our audiences the best of the arts and culture, staying true to our mantra, as always, that learning never stops. Tracing the evolution of Bombay to Mumbai has been a passion of mine and Avid's popular Multipolis Mumbai series that decoded the past while looking into the future and finding novel ways of engaging, interacting with, and re energizing the city we love. The series was started in 2012 and we presented 46 in person discussions on the Maximum City. In our online avatar, in February of this year, we launched a new series, Uncovering Urban Legacies, that looked at the Jewish diaspora in Bombay, followed by the Iranian diaspora. And today, we will examine the Portuguese. This live session on how the unique culture of these pre British settlers has historically, geographically, and socio-culturally shaped the city of Bombay. We strongly believe in collaboration. We're proud to present tonight's event with the Gateway House, Indian Council on Global Relations, our knowledge partners. Uncovering Urban Legacies, the Portuguese Heritage of Bombay. Allow me to introduce the speakers for the evening. Former Head of Department of History, St. Xavier's College, Mumbai, Fleur de Souza. Archaeologist, Culinary Anthropologist, Kurush Dalal. Portuguese professor and architect Sidh Losa Mendiratta, and they will be in conversation with author and Bombay History Fellow at the Gateway House, Sifra Lentin. For more about each of our speakers, please refer to their impressive bios that have been posted in the chat section. Our panel of experts will discuss the early shaping influences of the Portuguese on the way the city was built, developed, its impact on the city's religious, social history, architecture, urban infrastructure, language, rituals, and more. Please note the session will last 75 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A in which Sifra will be taking questions. So do keep posted throughout the session. On that note, thank you once again for tuning in. Over to you, Sifra, for your opening remarks and look forward to a fascinating session. Thank you.
Thank you, Asad. Welcome, everyone, to what promises to be an exciting discussion among our three panelists on Uncovering Urban Legacies, the Portuguese Heritage of Bombay. Before we begin our conversation, I want to flag some important points which will help you to contextualize what our three panelists, all well-known specialists and academics in their field, are going to share with us. First, when we are referring to the Portuguese heritage of Bombay, our panelists will be referring to a geographically much larger area than what we understand as the island city of Mumbai. This area corresponds roughly to Mumbai metropolitan region, or more specifically, they will be referring to a territory stretching from Palghar district to the north of our city, to Uran, just across from and south of Mumbai harbour. This was once known as the Portuguese province of the north, and it had its capital city in Bassein, which is today's Vasai. Bombay Islands were part of this Portuguese province once. How important was this province? What was its trade? How important was Bombay and Thane in the history of this Portuguese ruled territory? Can we still find traces of Portuguese heritage in this area today? These are some of the questions we will be exploring with our expert panel. Secondly, when we talk about Bombay's history and heritage, it is almost always the visible English East India Company and British Raj heritage that is referred to. No one even thinks about a Portuguese heritage, culture, and living legacy in our city today. In fact, most of the things that we take for granted as being local, whether it is food, spices, cuisine, fruits, feasts, festivals, and even some of the architecture that we think is indigenous, may actually have Portuguese roots. One of the most visible Catholic communities, the Bombay East Indians, are in fact a living legacy of the Portuguese presence in this region, which was broadly from 1534 to 1737-39. This community, in fact, are the original inhabitants of our city. And one of our panelists today, Professor Fleur de Souza, is a proud community member from Thane. And she's going to bust some of the tropes that we just accept as given as regards the Bombay East Indian and the Portuguese. Of course, Mumbai is also home to a sizable Goan and Meghalorian Catholic community who have migrated in large numbers since the 19th century to work in the city. But the focus today is literally on the sons and daughters of the soil, Bombay's very own Indo-Portuguese community, whose faith, culture, language, food, dress, celebrations, feasts, and gauthans tell us a story of a community that has forged its own unique identity in the multicultural milieu of Bombay. So now, without much ado, I'd like to begin the conversation with our esteemed panelists by actually beginning with Sidh, our professor and architect from Portugal. Sidh, given that the Portuguese established a global maritime empire in the Indian Ocean, can you tell us briefly why such a small nation would undertake such a big enterprise?
Hello, Sifra. Hello, everyone. I would like to first thank AVID Learning and Gateway House for this invitation. Addressing your question, I would like to share a few images, if I may. This small nation, Portugal, as you said, entered into the Indian Ocean in 1498 and tried to control it through 4 strategic ports, as you know, and failed only in one, in Albany. But it controlled the other 3, which were indeed the main hubs of the intra-Indic trade. Because the Portuguese nation, while they came to India in search of Christians and spices, they soon realized that it was very profitable to dominate the trade routes which were already existing, and through naval supremacy they tried to achieve that. Only partially they managed to do that for about 1 century. But I think there is a very interesting aspect, is that for the first 30 years of Portuguese presence in the Indian Ocean, there was not an idea or an attempt to control big portions of land like the classical empire. The idea was to control the trade routes, control the trading activity. And so, therefore, the fortifications and the outposts which were established during those first 3 or 4 decades, I say that they were not built to control the land, they were built to control and defend the sea. And, that changed around 1530, 1540. Imperial policy actually changed in Portugal. That's when the Portuguese crown decided to occupy considerable parts of land in India. The northern province, which is the signal.
Sidh, can you tell us a little about the northern province? Because Bombay is very much a part of that province, and its topic today is, of course, uncovering urban legacies in Bombay. So can you explain, because people really don't have an idea what this Portuguese northern province is, and what was Bombay and maybe Thane's role and importance in this province?
Yes, many people are not aware of the size of the province. It's around 4,500 square kilometers, which for Indian standards is not much. But for Portuguese context, it's quite a lot. It's more or less the similar area of the province of Algarve, where the beaches are here in Portugal. And this, another interesting aspect is that this territory was ceded through a treaty with the Gujarati Sultan.
Right.
1534, most of it. And then this entails that there was a kind of a peaceful transition in terms of economic and administrative system. And the Portuguese were happy to maintain for the first 2 years the administrative system which they found. In terms of Portuguese legacy, Mumbai Island, right at the tip of the northern province, the urban tip. So when the Portuguese ceded Mumbai Islands to the British in 1665, that was about 2% of the whole area of the province. And it was not the most developed area or the most profitable area, but it was a very strategic one, which the Portuguese knew themselves. In terms of archaeological heritage structures, I would point out to the 62 parish churches in the territory, plus 31 colleges and convents, and 8 houses of mercy, and then 23 other chapels and hermitages. 4 main fortresses. So we have Dio, Chau, Basar, and Dalal. And I include here Dio because, in spite of being a bit far away, initially administratively it was home. We have 7 other main forts, 53 smaller forts, some of them made out of wood, and about 60 documented tower houses. There were many more. So this amounts to about 238 archaeological sites spread over this land, which is today, I would say about 50 of them have disappeared. But I have been trying for the past few years to document as quickly as possible most of them. And I'd just like to make one point. I would like to address 3 sites specifically, if I may, Ashrigad, Kasai, Dalal. But before that, regarding the East Indian community, actually in this territory, the northern province, where you can see the subdivisions of the territory in the right-hand side of the screen, there was a certain area where there was actually no missionary activity and no attempt to convert the local inhabitants. Missionary activity was limited to the coastal portion of that northern province. And this helps to explain the distribution of the East Indian community, the original habitat, so to speak, of East Indian community.
Sid, what I'd like to really come to it, really ask you is, the British developed Bombay. Why didn't the Portuguese develop Bombay and its manor house? Because you were talking about this the other day and you said a lot of people ask me that question.
Yes, it's not easy to answer in a nutshell, but the Portuguese, in a sense, did develop Bombay from the moment they realized they were being threatened by the Dutch and the British in the ocean. So they realized the potential of having a very good harbor, protecting ships from the monsoon, large ships. And they realized this only when they had the necessity to do so.
Okay.
So the early 17th century onwards.
Right.
And there was a shipbuilding, ship repairing activity in Mumbai, Bombay village and Mazagan village.
Right.
But the British had other ambitions for Bombay because they wanted to develop it as their base, their main base in West India.
Right.
So that's when they decided to transfer all the equipment and system and buildings from Surat and trade from Surat down to Bombay. There is a lot of kind of a fairy tale aspect to Bombay's history. History of the dowry, the marriage.
Right.
Sometimes I feel like one should try to look for the hard facts. Other times I feel, well, fairy tale is part of it. Bombay's history is born as a city, is born in a fairy tale of a dowry. A very small amount of pounds through which the East Indian Company rented this islands. But one aspect of this fairy tale I have to address, which is the name.
Right.
Because a British gentleman, a doctor actually, invented this idea that the Portuguese name, Bombay, came from Loa of Bombay. So this was Dr. Fryer, John Fryer in the 1670s. And John Fryer, I believe, must have been a fine doctor, but he was not a very good etymologist because Portuguese is gender sensitive, so it could never be Bombay, it had to be Bombay. That's the adjective feminine. And besides that, whenever you have the place offer a geographical reference like a bay, a river, a mountain, any identification of a geographical spot,
Right.
the name of the geographical feature comes first.
Okay.
Bahia, so it would have to be Bahia Boa, and that name never comes up. The names that come up are very briefly in the documents, either the Boa Vida, which basically means having a good life or easy life, but that's for an initial period, and then there are hundreds of Portuguese documents, 16th, 17th.
So, Sidh, let me try to recap what you're saying. You're saying that the name Bombay actually doesn't come from Bombay or the Portuguese Bombay, but it's actually from the original Bombay, Mumbai. Yes. Right. Okay. Now, coming back to, I'd like to really talk to Kurush, because Kurush has been involved in the Salsette explorations for many years now. And I wanted to ask you, Kurush, is how would you determine or distinguish a site as a Portuguese archaeological site?
So, thank you very much, Avid, for having me here. Asad, Sifra, great honor to share the stage with my teacher, Fleur, and my friend, Sidh. So thank you very much for having me here to start off with. Time is short, so we'll try and keep this as tight as possible. I'm going to share screen immediately so that we don't waste any time. I hope we are in full screen mode. So, for what do we understand when we look at the archaeological remains of Mumbai? And we're looking at Portuguese remains from this period. What kind of remains do we see? So the most prominent Portuguese remains that we have in Mumbai and in the other places surrounding are the structural remains of Mumbai. So perhaps the most spectacular of this is the capital city itself, the capital city Bassein, which is now called Vasai. This is the seaward gate of Vasai, and there is an enormous amount of architectural treasure inside this fortified city. Beautiful churches and other buildings, preserved somewhat, but they could do with a lot more help. They are some of the biggest ambassadors of the Portuguese era. We have, of course, numerous churches inside along with the various orders. The best kept, of course, is the one on the top right-hand side, which is the Jesuit church, which had the Jesuit college attached to it and is essentially in very good condition because India's first Catholic saint, Gonzalo Garcia, was from here. So this church has been taken a lot of care of and is in a very good state. The rest of it is in a rather sad state of preservation. The city of Bombay itself has, in the gates of the Bombay castle, according to most archaeologists and historians, the gateway itself is supposedly of the Portuguese manor house built here by the very, very famous Garcia de Horta. There is really no way of, I think personally, putting your finger on it and saying it has to be Portuguese, but it is in keeping with the style and various other things from that period and therefore is quite acceptable. There is, of course, the great fallacy that there is this beautiful solar clock, the sundial on top, which is also Portuguese, which, as I found out, thanks to my friend Sidh, is an absolute load of rubbish. It's actually British. And this is one of the great problems of writing a history of this period. When one person makes a mistake, everybody just closes their eyes and just keeps following suit. But that said, after that ghastly paint job that the Navy did and the entire historical and heritage community went up in arms, it has subsequently been cleaned up quite well. And there is a very, very decent rendition now of the gateway. There are some very interesting Indic elements telling you that even though the Portuguese came here and built these things, they used a lot of Indian artisans. So within the grand framework of something that is a European gateway. There is an enormous amount of embellishment that is very, very Indian and very, very Indic. We also have the very famous Castella de Aguada, very often mistakenly called the Fortaleza de Aguada and other such terms, which is basically the castle, which is basically the fortification at Bandra, in somewhat better condition than the rest of the fortifications, but a lot of it is now cemented and concreted. The original inscriptions are mainly all very badly damaged, with the exception of this one that you see on the top left-hand side, which is not the one that you're seeing in the white marble plaque, which is an English inscription put in by a memorial for a Parsi gentleman. The other huge thing that the Portuguese give us on the ground is the churches that we have in the city of Mumbai. Now, this on the left-hand side is the famous Portuguese church at Dadar and what it looked like, and not the rather bizarre church that exists today in its place after it burnt down. On the right-hand side is the still extant structure of St. Andrew's at Bandra with the beautiful graveyard in front of it. And as I keep telling people, and I've been doing this for the last 25 years, well, it was built before the Taj Mahal was built. So to tell you about these magnificent structures that have existed in the city of Mumbai way, way before a lot of the other structures have. But there's an enormous other Portuguese heritage that most of us don't realize. St. Teresa's Church at Girgaon, also Portuguese. The Mahim Church, St. Michael's that you see in the center, today does not look like this, but also a Portuguese church. The beautiful church of St. John the Baptist at Seeps, sadly accessible only once a year on the feast. Also Portuguese, telling you how local craftsmen and local materials were used to build this amazing heritage in the Portuguese style. The other huge thing that we find at Portuguese sites are Portuguese coinage. So the Portuguese issued some amazing coins, some coins very, very specifically issued in the city of Bombay itself. So in the top center, the coin that you see is one of the Basin coins. And you see the B for Basin over here, if you can see my pointer. And these are from issues in that period. There are a number of silver coins. Gold coins are incredibly rare and normally found in private possession in houses. But we have some beautiful coins, including a coin locally called the tinglo. And it was called the tinglo because that was the sound it made when it fell down. And it was minted with a huge amount of tin in it, and it broke very easily. So it was a very low denomination coin. It was a rather large coin, and it made a ting sound. And the local people called it the tinglo. And you get beautiful broken examples of this from the Basin area and other parts of Mumbai too. Intact ones are very, very rare. So coins are a very, very big part of the Portuguese legacy. The earliest European coins that we have in India anywhere are essentially Portuguese coins, and we find Portuguese coins in this entire region. The other thing that tells you about Portuguese sites is actually not Portuguese. These are the beautiful ceramics of the Ming dynasty, or the Ming ceramics as they're called, which were brought here by Portuguese traders from China in vast quantities. So right from Revdanda and Korla in the south, all the way to Damao and Daman in the north of the Northern Territories, you will find tons of this in the local debris that exists at these sites. So when you find Ming porcelain in India, 9 out of 10 times, it's a Portuguese site on the west coast. And some of them have these beautiful chops at the bottom. These are all not sadly from Bombay, but you get them with their bases with beautiful Chinese inscriptions. Sometimes they're just poems, other times they're actually the names of the kings, and they help us to establish where these have specifically come from. We can actually tell you the maker of many of these pots directly and take you down to the site of the kin in China.
So, Kurush, where would you get to see those?
Sadly, most of these things are only seen in museums, in archaeological collections, or on the ground if you're actually doing ground surveys. There's a huge wealth of other data. There's some amazing art. Some of the most beautiful ivories ever carved in India, and I'm saying this, in India, okay, are the Portuguese ivories of this era. And those two, so the Prince of Wales Museum has a beautiful collection. The Archdiocese Museum, which has saved a large number of the interiors of old Portuguese churches. The beautiful reredos of the church, which has been ripped off when these churches have been in these throes of a very Indian Jirnodhar.
Right.
And they've been turned into these beautiful plywood and formica churches. The old reredos have been collected, and many of them have been saved at the Archdiocese Museum. So the Archdiocese Museum is a great place to see Portuguese art in Bombay. And for all of those who are from Bombay or who visit Bombay, I seriously recommend, and believe you me, guys, they're not paying me to do this. I really think you should go and see that. So it's a beautiful place to see.
Definitely going to put it on my to-do list, Kurush. Thanks a million. Now I'm going to come to Fleur, who is our historian on the panel and a Thaneite, Thanekar or Thanewali, as whichever term you want to use. Fleur, as a resident of Thane and belonging to an old family from Thane, and having done your thesis on Thane too, I wanted to ask you, what was the importance of Thane during the Portuguese era as an urban center and center of manufacturing?
I have this old map, which is anonymous, around 1747 of the Provincia do Norte, especially the southern section that concerns us.
Right.
And here you have Basai, here you have Thane, here you have the Ilia, the Solset, that is where Thane is at one end and Bandra is at the other,
Right.
and Kundar is at the other. And then you have a gap which was not under the Portuguese, and then you have Chaul here.
Right.
So here is Thane, here is Basai, Bombay would be here, and the island of Solset, of course, takes great prominence here. Now, if you see, there was this river that connects all these sites, and one more called Karanja, which is Uran.
Right.
All these three all these three sites of the Portuguese settlements, some bigger than the others. For example, Basai was the capital city, and it was the capital of the Provincia do Norte, fortified city. Thane, the whole city wasn't fortified. They attempted it at the last, and it was the first to fall to the Marathas, bringing to an end the Portuguese presence in the Provincia do Norte in 1737. So Thane plays a very important part, not only in the rise, but also the fall of the Portuguese in this area.
Fleur, you mentioned talking about urban structures, which were sort of the urbanization of Thane. And basically, what were and also as a manufacturing center during the Portuguese period. Would you like to touch upon that a bit?
Yeah. So let me go to the next slide, which is actually dating the picture doesn't date to 700 years ago. It is 700 years ago that this incident took place, much before the Portuguese came to Thane. There were 4 Franciscan missionaries who were offloaded at Thane, and they met with the whole 15 Christian families here. And because they fell foul with the administration of the area, they were put to death. Now, but the point I'm bringing this whole story up is to talk about, number one, that Thane was a port, and a great port from the 9th to the 14th centuries. After that, it lost its importance because it could not house or anchor ships of greater tonnage. And by the time you have the colonial period, you have ships of a heavier tonnage coming in. And therefore, that's one of the reasons. There are other political reasons for the decline of Thane as a port. But this goes to show that it was a thriving center. It had all kinds of varied nationalities that were living here, and that you have a recorded history of Thane from nearly the 6th century.
Right.
Yeah.
Fleur, would you like to touch upon that lovely little story about your church?
Yeah.
And how the Marathas left it really untouched when they, took over this territory.
Yeah. let me bring you to two points that you had referred to earlier. One of which is the fact that Thane was a city, and right in 1540, when the Viceroy Jean de Castro sailed past, he talked about how grand it was, and he says there were 60 very magnificent temples, tanks, and they were large. They had stone banks. So it shows that the city, remnants of the great city, was still existent even when the Portuguese came here. But it had certainly lost its place in the whole scheme of trade. Here is a map which shows you you can see these fortified towers. You can see the spine of hills that divides the eastern part of Salsette from the western. You can also see this little structure here, which is in Godbandar, and you can also see other structures on top of hills, which were all along the creek, called the manor houses. You can see one of the defensive structures, which was supposed to protect the creek and the town. Okay, so this is the Portuguese. I'm going very, very quickly now. Here is a reference to the church and parish of St. John the Baptist. And there's another reference to the many textiles in this description. It says there were gingims, which is a checked, rather like this.
Right.
A checked pattern. There were taffetas, which is a kind of a satin. There were writing desks, the famous blackwood writing desks, some of which had ivory inlays.
Okay.
And we have plenty of references to that in the records. So Thane was not just a port, but an industrial center, and this must be kept in mind.
Okay. Now I'm just going to dive directly into basically the cultural aspect of Portuguese history in Bombay. I wanted to actually come to Sidh and ask him that, as someone who's really studied the tangible and the intangible heritage, I mean, what are the visual markers that one would really have to look at to say that, you know, this is maybe a Portuguese, say a Gauthan, or I know that Kurush has talked about a bit about the churches and all, but would you like to really talk about anything unusual or something that a layman, say like me, who doesn't know much about this history, would really have to look out for?
Yes. One important aspect is building technology. The Portuguese used in their structures almost always lime plaster.
Okay.
And that contrasts very sharply with Maratha traditional technology of using big blocks of stone, which were usually unplastered.
Okay.
So, this is actually very helpful. I mean, not only Maratha, but for example, the Gujarati Sultanate also used that system, but the Portuguese were very keen on using lime plaster, and they were also not very good at quarrying for large stones.
Okay.
So they kept the large stones for the finer aspects of churches and windows and door jambs. So the building technology actually, this very basic building technology helps us to distinguish between Portuguese and non-Portuguese. But
right.
It's a bit more tricky once you start looking at the many tower houses, which are right at the center of many small villages,
Right.
from Thane right up to Daman and even north of Daman. So invariably in these villages, the ruins of this tower house, if they exist, they are known as Shivaji Kila. And
come again, Sidh, what are they known as?
Shivaji Kila.
Okay.
I guess Shivaji Fort.
Okay.
And so when we surveyed a few of these structures, about 20 all in all. These structures is also, some of them were well preserved, and they were very much considered to be part of Maratha heritage and culture.
Right.
In other situations, there was not that much of conscious, and some of them were actually used as toilets in villages which didn't have access to proper toilets. So this was a situation we had to deal with in the field. And I remember surveying near Bhutan village, you know, right at the heartland of the Koli community.
Right.
And there was a situation in which we wanted to survey a tower house, which was a kind of a ladies' toilet for that community. And we needed a very delicate approach from that to talk to people, and it took a few hours. But fortunately, we managed to do the survey of that watchtower. Now, I believe that trees are important also. And we had previously talked about in our preparatory meetings about the baobab tree,
right,
which helps to find ruins of Portuguese origin. I found. I cannot say that they were not there before, or the Portuguese, or why exactly, but I know that in Mozambique, for example, from where I think Eastern Africa is the original, the aboriginal place of that tree, particular tree. The fruit of the tree is made into a kind of a soup and into a kind of an oil. So here I'm thinking there might be a connection either to a the city influence, pre-Portuguese city, or also possibly slave population, which were close, knew the traditions and the value of these trees. These are two aspects, and of course there's this Indo-Portuguese dialect in Porlai, a small village near Shaul, which is a lovely. I'm not sure, Sifra, if you've been there.
No.
But it's really worth a visit. And here you sense that you're in a different village than I don't know really how to explain it. You see a lot of pigs running around. You see the crosses, of course, people coming together around the crosses and talking. And the language is a Indo-Portuguese Creole, but the scale and of the houses also. The houses are a bit more spread out with maybe some garden areas. So those are some of the pointers you can look out for in traditional, or at least villages with East Indian population.
To really understand the Indo-Portuguese heritage of our city and this entire province, as it were. So, Sidh, just one more question, actually, which has been bothering me. I don't know, I may be wrong about this, but these little East Indian enclaves, or within the city, the kind of bungalows that they have, with the rafters and the high roofs and all, is that local or is that Portuguese? Is there some kind of local influence, or is it something that's come from overseas?
I wouldn't say that the materials used in construction nowadays would be of Portuguese origin. I would probably see a stronger British influence.
Okay.
I would see maybe I hesitate to call it Portuguese influence, but an Indo-Portuguese influence in the way that the villages are spread out, their urban or their layout, and the footprints. And the scale between built and non-built areas. So like Pakachibari and those areas, very sense that there's a different scale, sense of scale. And so I wouldn't say so much about the roofs and the wood and the building materials,
but
a sense of scale, of proximity and intimacy in urban space.
The layout, in that sense, having a village square or whatever, would that be what you're talking about, or is just the scale of what it is? the way it is,
Both. It's
the
both.
way it is planned?
I'm not sure if you've been to Ranvar village near Bandra.
No, I've been to Kotachiwadi and Matar Pakadi within the city, within the island city.
So I think in Kotachiwadi you don't have a square per se, central area, but that is very much present in Ranvar near Bandra.
Okay.
It's also a traditional East Indian center.
Okay.
And there was definitely in a Catholic, let's use that word, in a Catholic village, there would be a church and a center and a cross.
Okay.
And at certain point of the day, usually the people would come around that cross, maybe also younger people, children, they would sing religious songs and they would meet the priest. And so the square and the cross, usually near the church, almost definitely in front of the church, would be, yes, it would be the European square in that traditional European sense, that, which is a very different notion of public space than we have in non-Catholic or non-Portuguese influenced villages in the western coast of India, which many times don't have a very recognizable center and are more scattered and maybe originally even divided into certain subsections of the village into 5 or 6 areas which were a bit separate. That's not to say that the Portuguese were not also conscious of different sectors in the Indian population, because as we know, usually caste consciousness was retained upon conversion to Christianity, Catholicism by the Portuguese. And so, for example, in Bandra, you have the very specific case of the Church of St. Andrew being built later than the Church of St. Anne, which has disappeared, because the parishioners of the Church of St. Anne were not happy with having to share their church with the Poli fishermen for whatever reasons they had. So they told the Portuguese priest, these Christians need to have their own separate parish, or at least their own separate church, and we don't want to kind of mingle in church with them. And the Jesuits, as pragmatists, in this case of Bandra, as you know, was a Jesuit, a very strong economic center. The Jesuits were pragmatists, and they said that was all fine, and they gave them their separate church, which is St. Andrew's, which now has this flourishing East Indian community.
Thanks, Sid. I'm going to come to Fleur right now. I mean, what are the manifestations of East Indian culture in our city, Fleur? I mean, one of the things that, I've been wondering about is, why did they change their name from, the different names they had earlier, particularly in India census, they were known as Indo-Portuguese. Why did they change their name to the Bombay East Indian?
Oh, that's a tall order, but I will try and work through that. You asked me about the church, but we didn't get a chance to.
No, we could probably bring it up later. So, I'm on, we could really start with this, because this is an important question too.
Let's very, very quickly go. Who are the East Indians? A community of people indigenous to the region who were one. The most important marker is Roman Catholicism, largely Marathi speaking, homeland in pockets in the island city, Mumbai suburbs, former Salsette Island, Dharavi Island, not Dharavi slum, Thane, Vasai, and Kodla in the south. Okay, here are some of the many East Indian enclaves that you will see right from North Vasai down to Kolaba here in South Mumbai. Okay, so you see this is a sort of classification by perhaps the kind of Christians, the kind of East Indians who inhabited these areas. Very quickly, I'm going to go through a very step-by-step explanation. Places to the east of the Cape of Good Hope were called the East Indies by people in the West. The term East Indian was adopted by all classes in India to distinguish descendants of the Europeans and native mothers. There were several East India associations. Please, there's an East India Association in Chennai. There's an East India Association in Calcutta. There was an East Indian Association in Bombay. East India, not the Bombay East Indian Association. Please, there is a distinction between the two. In 1825, there was a meeting of the East Indian Petition Committee held in the town hall of Calcutta. And they made a special petition in the House of Commons. However, this has nothing to do with the Bombay East Indians. And nobody knows why they took their name, this name. We can only make an informed guess. Now, William D'Souza offers his explanation. He said East Indians, the term was adopted by all classes in India to distinguish descendants of Europeans and native mothers. The term that referred to this section of the community came to be adopted by the entire group who did not have European ancestry, and they call themselves the Bombay East Indian Association.
Okay.
It's history, not geography, that gives us clues. Here are some of the names that the community was called before they took the name Bombay East Indian. They were called Notairos by people from Goa, the people of the north. They were called Kristaus by the Hindu and Muslim neighbors. It's very interesting that the Hindus and the Muslims made a distinction between the Portuguese Christian influence and the British or the English Christian influence. The English church was called the Sahib Lok Church. They were called Thane Christians in the Thane district gazetteer. They were called Bombay Portuguese, Bandra Portuguese, Native Portuguese. These names are all to be found in legal documents. And they were also called Salset Christians, as in the Times of India. Self-nomenclature, people identify themselves by their caste names, but the term East Indian was adopted in 1887 with the foundation of the East Indian Association. In around the 1990s, with the Shiva Sena campaign, the Sons of the Soil, they took the name Me Mumbaikar. And today, most East Indians would call themselves Mumbaikars.
Fleur, that's an interesting sort of narrative that you've given us. I mean, but now I'm going to ask the most yummy part of the whole thing.
Okay.
Is that what about the feasts and the festivals and the celebrations of your community? And were they different from local communities? Were they borrowed from the Portuguese? Are they only unique to the Bombay East Indians?
Okay, so there is this dramatization of the Passion of Christ that you will not see in all churches of Bombay.
Okay.
You see it only in the older churches, particularly those with the Portuguese influence. Most of the newer churches do not have this whole thing. It's called the Pasu. It's the Passion of Christ. So for the 4 Sundays in Lent, you see a figure here of Christ. Here he is tied to the pillar, and you have the local parishioners, adjusting the statue. Very often the statues had movable limbs. So it's very interesting, their whole, remember that the East Indians, a lot of them worked excellently with woodwork. So they made these statues. And on Good Friday itself, there was this elaborate, very dramatic, highly dramatic ceremony of bringing this statue down from the cross, and it is very, it inspires a lot of awe and reverence. But I find these only in churches that are former Indo-Portuguese churches. Okay, here is something that I don't even know they have in Goa. These are called the papias. It's a dying tradition. There is a attempt to now revive them. Papias are dirges sung by penitents late in the night, usually men. They wear these caped dresses. Nobody's supposed to look at them. It's quite eerie, actually. I have never heard one of them, but those people who've heard these papias, the penitents and their dirges, say it is quite eerie as it happens late at night. So this is something that's very, very typical of the East Indian community. The dirges are written in the East Indian dialect, Marathi dialect, and they're very interesting to study and to work with. Another very important tradition which is revived these days is the Agera, the blessing of the newly harvested paddy. It's usually on the first Sunday of October. And in the same village of Uttan, I had the fortune to see this whole community sitting and preparing the wedding feast. So they still do that. It's a very common thing. But in our urban areas, it's difficult to find a space where the women can congregate and prepare the wedding feast together. So these are quite unusual. Here, this is a very special ceremony before the wedding. It's called the Umratsa Pani ceremony. It's a ritual bath before the wedding. And it's being revived now in the urban areas. I see it as a revival in the urban areas as a reassertion of tradition. So you have the family and friends going to the well and drawing water from a well. They try and find the well. Of course, now there are no wells in the city, but they try and find a well which has a fig tree next to it. That's why it's called Umratsa Pani. And they believe that the fig is a symbol of fertility. And a very interesting thing for anybody who is trying to find where a water source is just to see where a fig tree grows. You know, you can be sure that there is an underground source of water there. These are things that our parents have told us in our childhood. So the Umratsa Pani is a ritual that is celebrated throughout in some areas, but it's being revived in the urban areas and even in places like in Canada and Australia as well.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to...
No, so obviously, I guess a lot of people have immigrated to the US and Canada from the community.
Yes. You wanted to talk about the sweets now, or you want to say?
Oh, no, I'll save that for a little later, Fleur. Yeah. Okay. Kurush, I want to come to you. You mentioned that it's not just what the Portuguese gave us, but what did the Portuguese take home with them from India's West Coast? So what did they give us and what did they take from us in terms of cuisine?
Okay. So they gave us a lot. I'm not even going to go down the road of everything that we can do. And we need Asad to do a completely separate session on just everything the Portuguese brought down. Forget about what the Portuguese took back with them. But suffice to say that there is an enormous amount of things that we have in India which we wouldn't have if it wasn't for the Portuguese. Whenever I teach Mumbai's history and Mumbai's archaeology and the archaeology of India and the culinary heritage of India, something that I tell everybody is that next time you want to impress your friend, your girlfriend, your better half, whatever it might be, tell them that you're going to take them out to eat something Portuguese, take them to the corner vada pav stall and feed them a vada pav. Because there isn't probably anything more Portuguese than a vada pav. They brought the pav to India. Actually, pav and bao, the two words that they use mostly all over Asia for the leavened risen bread, are all Portuguese words. They brought us the potatoes that make the vada. They brought us the groundnuts that make the chutney, the groundnuts whose oil in which we fry them, and they brought us the chilies. And this was all thanks to the Columbian exchange, which was thanks to Christopher Columbus opening up that route across from the Americas to Europe, and subsequently all those different things that flowed in with him. So fruits, vegetables, corn, chilies, which are so ubiquitous all over India, potatoes without which we can't live today as good Indians, be it your lagnachi batatechi bhaji for the Maharashtrian weddings, or be it your mangsho jhol on Robibar in Bengal, or be it the aloo paratha, or the Punjabi samosa, or the masala dosa. Wherever you go, the potato is now completely and totally Indian, as is the chili, and we probably have more varieties than they have in South America. That said, all of this came to us thanks to them. We renamed a lot of things. Peru is only called Peru in Maharashtra and Gujarat. It's a guava everywhere else in the world. Chiku is only called Chiku again in Gujarat and Maharashtra. It's a sapota everywhere else. They also brought amazing spices to us. Not necessarily that those spices were Portuguese, but thanks to the Portuguese, nutmeg, mace, and definitely cinnamon came to us from across in Southeast Asia.
Right.
And in all probability, they were the first people to start bringing vanilla in also, though there is a bit of controversy about exactly who brought the vanilla here and when it came to India and so on and so forth. Something that they brought, which was not unknown to Indians, but not really used on a large scale, was vinegar. All the wine that goes bad in Portugal turns into vinegar. And we joke about it, but they actually make an enormous amount of vinegar from their wine, where they allow acetosis to take place so that it turns into vinegar. So cooking with vinegar meant that you now had food that could stay for a decent period of time. It added a completely different souring agent, one that you didn't need to worry about its freshness, picking it off a tree, availability, so on and so forth. And the Goan coconut vinegar is essentially an adaptation of the brilliant wine vinegars that the Portuguese brought with them. As it traveled north, where the coconut was not so prevalent, the sugarcane was turned into vinegar all over Gujarat. So the entire vinegar business, the Parsis making so many things with vinegar, vinegar being used in so many Catholic dishes, is all thanks to the Portuguese bringing it here. They gave us the variety of mango that we call the Alfonso. They brought the kaju to India. I mean, imagine there'd be no kaju katli in India if it wasn't for the Portuguese. Of course, there wouldn't be any feni either. They also did some very interesting things with horticulture, because this is something about the Portuguese we don't talk about. The Portuguese was seriously into horticulture in many ways. I mean, we talk about Garcia da Horta's famous garden in Bombay, but we don't realize that a lot of the Portuguese in Goa and other places actually worked very, very hard on the different fruits and vegetables that were available there and tweaked them to get their own very specific varieties, like the famous Moira bananas that you see on the bottom, which now have a GI tag. What did we give back to them? We gave them peppercorns. We've been given peppercorns to Europe forever, but the Portuguese now could take them back in massive quantities straight to Portugal, and they didn't have to come through the Red Sea. They didn't have to cross the Mediterranean and get to them. They were now one of the biggest purveyors. They actually came in their own words for souls and spices, and actually not in that order, but for spices and souls is how it says. So it tells you what their prioritization was. We also made the coconut very, very much a part of a lot of Portuguese cuisine, and a lot of coconut made its way, especially dried coconut and semi-dried coconut, made its way to Portugal and the Portuguese colonies in a very, very big manner. The Portuguese gave us some of our best loved dishes. This is, of course, the very famous vindaloo, which we know everywhere. And for some reason, everybody thinks vindaloo means something that is cooked with aloo or potatoes, and that's completely and totally wrong. It's actually wine vinegar and garlic, and these were preservatives, and they allowed the food to be carried for a long time. We, of course, completely Indianized it and then gave it back to the Portuguese in this avatar of its own. But my favorite Portuguese dish actually is not the vindaloo, but the sorpotel. It's very, very tedious to make. You have to sit and chop all kinds of bits and parts of offal into tiny, tiny bits along with fat and meat. And then you cook it very slowly with a lot of spices and vinegar. And if you're making it in the very traditional way, you add fresh blood to it. Very few people add blood to it any longer. But there are three big communities of Portuguese descendants in India: the Goans, the Mangaloreans, and the East Indians. They all make a sorpotel. But this is the amazing diversity and, the unity in diversity and the diversity in unity, that they all make a different kind of sorpotel. It's got the same basic ingredients, but a Goan sorpotel has a very little bit of gravy and a lot of meat in it. The Mangalorean sorpatel has the same flavors, but chunkier meat, and is a curry to be eaten with rice and not with poi as the Goans eat it. The East Indians make it almost like a pickle. It's beautifully reduced, slow cooked, and keeps for weeks on its own without being refrigerated. So all of these communities took the same dish, they took the same nomenclature, and then they adapted it in their own ways. And I keep telling people that if you really want to eat something that is truly East Indian and truly Portuguese in Bombay, it's the sorpatel, it's the East Indian bottle masala, which is incredibly famous. I grew up seeing it being made in Bandra every summer. And it's stuffed into bottles just to keep it tight. And it's stuffed into used beer bottles because, like any good Parsi house or any good Goan house, there are always a few extra beer bottles lying around. So it'd be stuffed in without any air being allowed inside, and then capped and used throughout the year. So aunties would get together in the evenings in their backyards in Bandra, and I'm sure Fleur will tell you that this happened in Thane also. And there would be a nice roaring fire, a big karai on it. The masalas would be dried, pulverized, and then brought together. So much of what is Indian today, so much of what we think is such an Indic tradition is actually thanks to the Portuguese. And you can't miss the Portuguese influence of the vada pav on every single street corner in Bombay. So to me, that is one of the biggest contributions that the Portuguese have left us behind.
Gosh, Kurush really made our mouths water. Now I'm going to come to Fleur, because Fleur is the one who's going to tell us all about the Portuguese sweets. And she was also telling me about a distinction between bottle masalas and non-bottle masala dishes. So Fleur, can you elaborate a little on that? Because that really also got my mouth watery, especially for those with the sweet tooth.
Yeah, so let's start with masapav. Everyone calls it marzipan today, but from my childhood, it was always masapav. And this is a masapav delicacy. I'll tell you more about it. This is atola, which is going to come up in 3 days' time. Atola is the new rice, which will be cooked in a kind of a porridge or in a kind of a sweet with the coconut and jaggery. You can't go wrong with rice, coconut, and jaggery in our coastal cuisine.
Right.
Rice, coconut, and jaggery are the basic ingredients of several dishes. So the interesting thing is the chauli, the black-eyed peas that you see over here. Chauli. Now everybody is. I've come up with my own explanation to that. Why is the chauli there? The chauli will provide the protein element in this dish, and I also believe that, but I don't have any proof for it, that perhaps protein like tur, chauli, and other beans were grown along the bunds where the paddy was sown. So they would have 2 crops at the same time. Okay. So this is to honor the ancestors, because the 2nd of November is All Souls Day, and that is the day we honor the ancestors. So here you have the spot of atola. I just put the sprig of unhusked rice so that there is some reference to this. Now I must tell you about this dish. This is very, very unusual. It is called a palgan, and this is given by the bride's family to the groom's family at the engagement. So this is a very beautiful picture sent to me by Astrid Rodrigues. Thank you very much. And she is so particular about the way she does this. She says, I go to the bride and ask her what are her colors for the wedding. And whatever her colors are, whatever the dress she's wearing, she says she replicates the colors here. And if you can see, she's put a little gold engagement ring there. Now, this is called masapav in fruit form is something that we make very, very traditionally. Each one is hand molded and hand painted. It's very tedious, but it's done with a great labor of love. This is the palgan. This is the wooden mold. And this is the covered with marzipan and the finished product. The Clasped hands, of course, are for the engagement. God bless these hands united. God bless these hearts made one. That's the inscription that you have there. Also, on the day after the wedding is the Horn of Plenty. Also, marzipan fruits and vegetables coming out of the Horn of Plenty and given to the groom's family, lucky groom's family. They get 2 of the palgans for every wedding. But this is truly a work of art. And from the time I was a child, I was fascinated by these palgans. These are just 2 that Astrid has sent me these pictures. And the first one was sent to me by my cousin, Deborah Lawrence of Bandra. So these are some of the lovely traditions that are still continued among the community. Then there are the bowls and the bolus. There are several of these, and one very interesting influence that we have is the use of rose water in these sweets. But we'll talk about that another time. So this particular one has a pastry base and a filling, and it is not baat that the Goans have, because this is made out of coconut, semolina, and mawa. So it's very, very unusual. Easter eggs, pancakes. For Pancakes Tuesday, it's called Elijao. Neuris, very, very common at every festival. You have a whole plate of sweets laid out on the table for Christmas. You have the perad or the guava cheese, or you have the jujubes, you have marzipan, you have the bowl, the grau, that is a cake made out of gram. And here is the famous bottle masala. It's flavor and not pungency. That's the hallmark of the curries. Now, I would just like to say there are dishes made with bottle masala, but there are also dishes made without bottle masala. So the famous ones are lonbas, could be moil sarpatel, which is, we don't say sorpatel, sorry, we say sarpatel. And dishes that do not use bottle masala, a kujit or a purit, it's a very light, delicately flavored yellow curry, which you use with pomfret and very light fish. The vindyalu or the indial, both these names are used, not vindalu. And corned tongue, corned beef, potato chops, cutlets, pan rolls. The variety of breads is amazing. So for every day you have the appers or the hand bread made out of rice flour. You have fugias and chitiaps and varias, which are made on festive occasions. Pan rolls with a meat filling. You have the potato chops, which I think is a British influence and not Portuguese. You have the stuffed pomfret, which is another very, very famous delicacy. And this is the table well laid out. My friend Caudle tells me that each dish had a name tag. And so, for example, this is corned tongue. So it would be called the tongue that never told a lie. And there are the East Indian sausages here. And then, of course, you have, this is called wedding rice. It's a very special preparation for weddings and feast days. This is, of course, the stuffed pigling, which is also a must-have on festival and celebrations. These are the fugias. Yes, I think we'll go back and come back to dress if we have the time. So,
actually, Fleur, we are running out of time, but I just want a very, very quick answer from you on this. Is what are the challenges the community faces today, especially in view of the hyper development of our city? Has it led to a dilution of the East Indian identity?
Of course it has, because no longer are the community spaces open to them. The Gauthans or the village highlands, or where the residential areas of the village were, are no longer. Bombay is a very cosmopolitan city. And Bombay is a very multicultural, multi-religious city. And very, very quickly, the spaces that were open to the East Indians for celebration of festivals and all that are now gone. So there is a feeling of displacement. There's a feeling of dispossession, and the community feels that uniquely. But I want to add that the community is striving very hard to revive some of the old traditions and to assert its identity. But that can be some other time.
Okay, thanks a lot, Fleur. I'm going to open out for questions right now, and we've received quite a few. The first question goes to Sidh. It's asks you that, do you see any similarities in culture between Portuguese and India while you traveled across the length and breadth of our country?
I've seen similarities in culture.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure which aspects of Indian civilization we are talking about. There's so many cultures together. I'm really not sure how to answer that question. I have, well, I myself am an Indo-Portuguese person, so I have both sides of the world running in my veins. I feel very much at home in India and Portugal, and I encourage everyone to travel. I love receiving Indians here in Portugal because there's something which I am proud of. Is Portuguese cuisine. It's probably the one thing I can say I'm really proud of is Portuguese cuisine. So whenever friends from India come, I make it a point to and then of course the conversation goes to if they're from Goa or from Bombay, then the similarities between the two. But they're two different. Portugal is a very small culture in Europe. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
Okay. I think this is a question for Fleur. It's come from a lady called Indrani Chatterjee. And Indrani asks, are the penitents the same as the lost penitents in New Mexico and USA?
I wouldn't. Do I have to? Okay. I wouldn't know that. I will have to research that. But from what, at least here in India itself, this seems to be a very local Bombay tradition. I don't even know whether they have it in Goa. I tried to find out.
Okay.
Have this custom in Goa. So I would have to research that and find out whether it's the same. Do they go from cross to cross, wayside cross to cross? Here, the penitents go from wayside cross to wayside cross in the middle of the night. They sing these dirges. They pray. They use something called a clapper, which is a wooden instrument. I have a picture somewhere, but not here, which makes the most eerie sound as it is sounded. And there's a lot of mystery attached to them. So superstitious people say you shouldn't look at the penitent, something bad will happen to you. So there's a lot of mystery, a lot of darkness surrounding this whole custom. And it's usually after Maundy Thursday, between Maundy Thursday and Good Friday. So it's part of that whole Passion Week. I'm sorry, Mrs. Chatterjee, I will have to research that and get back to you at some other point of time.
Kurush, this is a question for you. What is the rationale of using blood in Portuguese food? Does it have unknown nutrients?
So, number one, it is not exclusively Portuguese. All over the world, blood has been a part of food and has never been wasted by traditional communities. It's only urban elites who buy meat on specific parts of the body and specific parts of the offal separately. Everybody elsewhere eats everything and nothing is wasted. It's nose to tail eating. Blood is packed with nutrients. It's dense with vitamins and various other minerals that your body needs, and has been eaten all over Western India as rakti. Rakti is what it is called. The Goans have eaten it way before the Portuguese were a glimmer in Europe's eye, as have the Maharashtrians, the Gujaratis, and everybody. It's incredibly popular all over the Northeast. It's incredibly popular all over Southern Maharashtra, even today, in a very, very big way. It's now become something that's looked down upon and looked as a poor man's food, which is sad. But that's the way food is aspirational, and that's the way it happens. Blood has, as I said, it's incredibly tasty. The blood pudding, as it's called, which is essentially a black sausage, as it's called, or a black pudding, is a huge part of European food, and it's a very big part of the British breakfast. It's also eaten all over Europe, and it's a bit of an acquired taste to eat blood sausage, but blood cooked in sorpatel, you don't really realize what you're looking at. And with those beautiful spices mixed in, it just enhances the flavor. The metallicness of the blood basically enhances the meat and the entire texture, and the masalas also work beautifully with it. So yes, it has been a very, very big part of sorpatel traditionally. Sadly, not easily available today because you don't have your neighborhood pork butchers any longer, and therefore something that is eaten less and less. It's nowadays usually just meat, fat, and liver that you see in most sorpatels. You don't even see the other offal, the heart, the spleen, the kidneys, because those are difficult to get. So all of this was very much a part of everybody's food everywhere in the world. And therefore, the Portuguese and the Goans, the sons of the soil Goans and the Portuguese had all eaten this before and found nothing at all wrong in eating it.
Thanks, Kurush. There's someone who's asked again, so Bombay was derived from the Portuguese word and not the Hindi word Mumba Devi, as we are told. So would someone like to take that up?
Sidh and Fleur.
I believe that, yes, the words has been pretty well explained where the word comes from. It comes from Mumbai, from Mumba Devi, from the root of the word is there. It's clear. The Portuguese had a difficulty in pronouncing the M at the beginning. So saying Mumbai, it's very difficult to pronounce that for a Portuguese native speaker. Mumbai sounds strange. Bombay sounds something much more fluent to the Portuguese language. So the name issue is one of those issues which I find so fascinating, how the longevity of these cliches or misunderstandings, like also the Seven Islands is one of them. And well, I was going to address the Bellapur Fort being a city fort is another, but I would just like to make a slight correction, if I may, regarding Kurush's.
Please.
Yeah.
If I may, the Portuguese, the Portuguese envoy, when he set foot on the shores of the Indian Western coast, said, we're seeking Christians and spices, not souls and spices. There's a difference there, and I'll just try to make my point, is that the Portuguese believed there was a Christian king called Prester John somewhere in Asia. They didn't know where. And then they found out he was not in Asia, so they thought maybe he was in Ethiopia. But when they set foot, they didn't think about converting anyone at that time. It was not in their plans. They thought they were going to find Christians there in India. And it was just about 30, 40 years later that they had this kind of idea of converting, which comes in a different political context altogether, and which is the same context with which they decide to develop the northern province as a very stable economic rice-producing, wood-producing territory. So, and Bellapur Fort is the example of also an influence of British history or British influence, because a small footnote in a British book says that Belarpur Fort is a city fort. And that idea has stuck. The Belarpur Fort comes from a Maratha clan called the Patkars, one of the 96 traditional Maratha clans who built the fort and entered into an alliance with the Portuguese. So the Patkar clan fielded troops for the Portuguese, and the Portuguese in return let them keep Belarpur and that area. So I know that Belarpur Fort, the tower, has been having some issues with its stability, and I hope that a lot more can be done for Belarpur Fort.
There's one thing that you must also, I think Sidh should also tell you, as a Portuguese speaker, that this whole thing about Bombay isn't even Portuguese. The good harbor would be Bombay, not Bombay.
It would be Bahia Boa.
Bahia Boa.
Definitely be
Yes.
Bahia Boa, like Bahia da Guanabara, Bahia de Todos os Santos. So Bahia would be first.
The Bay of,
Yeah.
Yes, Bahia Boa, but it doesn't make sense.
And
Bombay is nonsense.
I think that map that Sidh put up, that settles it. There it is very, very clearly MOMBAIN, and that should settle the matter once for all.
Agreed.
Anyway, we are going to now move on to the next question because there are loads of questions that have come in. Either Sidh or Kurush can take this. This is a question about St. Andrew's Church in Bandra. Okay. Is there any truth to the theory that the orientation of the church was changed from being sea-facing to what it is now, that is facing Hill Road or Chimbai Road, after a cyclone damaged it? Also, when was the church expanded and what happened to its original facade?
As far as I know, that is an urban myth, but this is Sid's province and Fleur's province, not my province.
Sidh and Fleur?
Okay, I have been very interested in looking at the orientation of most of the churches in this region, and I found that most of them are east-west. And there are very, very few. For example, the church in Thane is north-south, which is very unusual. The Franciscan church in Vasai is north-south, but most other churches are east-west, which is a very common thing even in temples, the east-west orientation. Besides, there is a window in the St. Andrew's Church, and on the equinox, if I'm not mistaken, there's a ray of light that comes straight onto the altar. So if it was the other way around, then the ray of light would strike in the evening.
Okay.
And generally worship is in the morning. So it's like the sun touching its rays to the altar early in the morning. As a child, I remember walking out of St. Andrew's Church, which had a porch. Subsequently, the porch has disappeared and the facade has moved, meaning it's a new facade. It's not the old facade. It's maybe a replica of the old, but it is not the original facade. So the church has been extended towards on the eastern side. From the little that I know, I do not think the orientation was west-east. I think the orientation is east-west as it is. And I know that the facade was moved after 1964.
We've just, yeah.
I would just like to add that it's perfectly possible that the facade had the orientation which it has today, because the church was built at a time, if I'm not mistaken, so it was 400 years, 1617 or 1616, I believe.
Yes, 16.
So at that time, the kind of rule which was there before, which was all churches facing towards the opening towards the east, towards the west, sorry, and the main chapel towards the west. So it's very interesting because that was so that in Judgment Day, when the dead would rise from their tombs, they would be facing Jerusalem. And the Portuguese didn't think right away, they were not that clever, that they had crossed the longitude of Jerusalem. And so in India, they should build their churches the other way. But it took them about 50 years. Well, actually, it has more to do with the Council of Trent and other things. But so it was decided that rule that the church's main altar has to face the east, irrespective of where the church is built. That rule was dropped, I would say, around 1550, 1560. So it's perfectly possible that the St. Andrew's Church, being a later church, which we know it is, could face the opposite direction. The facade issue is, I believe, it might be the same, some of the same elements in stone or in the ornamentation, which were saved and then repositioned in their places. But of course, the facade has shifted quite a bit.
I think we've just got time for just one more question. And Virgil Vihan Sequeira has asked, is music has been a very important tool of the Portuguese across their colonies. Any insights across a panel on the legacy of music amongst the East Indian community? Fleur, you'd like to take that?
Yes. Most music in the early years would have been associated with church music. Yeah. The choir, the instruments. I was talking to Naresh Fernandez the other day. So we do not have too many references to a special kind of music till the 19th century. That picture that I showed you is of a group of musicians in one of the villages in Thane, which has had the most lasting Portuguese influence. So definitely violins and banjos and the ukulele, these were there. Later on, we have the great tradition of the brass bands, which the street bands, which played for weddings and other celebrations, including funerals. Yeah. So there are references in literature to singing and musical instruments during these colonial times. Outside of church music, we still have to research and find out. But the current day East Indians have a great tradition of singing and competitions in the East Indian Marathi dialect. So they write their own songs and perform them. There are 2 or 3 different types. It's really very, very interesting. I once wanted to find out whether the music and the lyrics were in any way political and were used in movements and in rallies, etc. Sometimes, yes, several of the songwriters write music and write the lyrics in protest. But generally, it is the upbeat, the uttara, those songs that are more popular. And this great tradition of having these song competitions has even carried on till the present day in its online avatar, which had people from all over the world participating thanks to the pandemic.
Are there any of these online apps or whatever where they play it on YouTube or whatever, any site?
Yes. Oh, yes. Definitely, there are.
Okay. One last question related to music, Fleur, if you could quickly answer this. Is there much Portuguese influence on Indian music, like the fado, for example? Would you be able to?
I wouldn't know about that in the Northern Province context.
Okay. I think our time is up, and I think we've learned a lot. A lot of interesting questions come in, and maybe we could have something else to answer them, maybe another session or whatever, but after a while. So I'm going to hand this over to Asad and thank all my panelists, Fleur, Sidh, and Kurush, for an absolutely fascinating journey into the Portuguese legacy of Bombay. Thank you so much.
Thank you to our wonderful speakers for sharing such insight, and I agree with Kurush's first suggestion of doing a sequel, and now your Sifra. So you've actually promised that, but this has to be offline. It cannot be online. I mean, I want to eat that mascarpone and guava cheese and actually see to pronounce it correctly, sarpatel. And the music part, since we've not gone too deep into it, we'll probably rope in Naresh to actually work on that and do a whole music component, probably do it at the opera house and maybe have a competition. Now I'm getting carried away, but it's early in the morning for me. But no, honestly, thank you so much. And Sifra, thank you for moderating the session so skillfully. This is the third program in our series that we've jointly started with the Gateway House, our partner. So thank you to them. And Sifra, we are already plotting in our minds the fourth edition. So you'll get a call from me in a few days. No, but honestly, and most of all, thank you to our participants. We've had such great response to this session and all of them in the series, because it would make sense for us to do this if you all weren't here in so many numbers. We have many more interesting programs coming up in Avid, and for a change, we are not going to spam you next week. We're taking the week off for Diwali. We have at least a program or two each week on Avid Online. Our next live session is another series that we have called Across Cultures, which is the universal language of music, which is on November 10th. And then we have another series we're going to be continue with, looking at cultural capitals, future legacies of cities, where we are going to be looking at the city of Kohima in Nagaland. But lots more. Find out more. Just stalk us on social media or check out our website. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and thank you once again for a wonderful session. Have a good evening.